The IMF has published its latest fiscal monitor. Carlo Cottarelli, Director of the Fiscal Affairs Department, outlines some key fiscal developments and presents new analysis on experiences with fiscal consolidation episodes.
Our report, the Fiscal Monitor, shows that many advanced economies have made quite a lot of progress in reducing budget deficits. At the same time, market sentiment has improved, and these two developments together have lowered short-term risk for the fiscal account. But fiscal challenges remain quite elevated in several cases. There are essentially 10 fairly large economies plus a few smaller ones where public debt is not only high but is also still rising. Now 10 is not a big number, but together these countries account for 40% of world output, so quite a lot.
In the 10 advanced economies with significant needs for fiscal adjustment, debt ratios are high, above 90% of GDP, and are still rising. The group includes the United States, Japan, the United Kingdom, and 7 euro area members: France, Italy, Spain, Belgium, Greece, Portugal, and Ireland.
When we talk about fiscal problems in advanced economies, we are talking primarily about this group. These countries will have to improve their fiscal positions further, and then they will have to maintain primary surpluses for several years if they want to reduce their public debt to more prudent, more cautious levels. Indeed, in many cases, the fiscal effort that is required is unprecedented from an historical perspective. In the latest fiscal monitor, we put the fiscal effort that is needed into historical perspective by looking at what advanced economies managed to achieve during the last 60 years when they were at their best in terms of fiscal performance. In other words, when they really tried hard to have fiscal adjustment. What is important in bringing the currently very high public debt to GDP level to more prudent levels is for governments to run large primary surpluses over a prolonged period of time. That's why our analysis focuses on historical fiscal achievements over a 10-year period.
The chart shows a distribution of these achievements across advanced economies. In particular, it displays on the vertical axis the number of countries and on the horizontal axis the corresponding best primary surplus they maintained over 10 years. Thus, all countries in the sample managed to maintain a primary surplus of at least 1% of GDP on average over a full decade, and a few even managed to run surpluses of more than 5%. The median in this group is 3.25% of GDP. Now let's compare this with the primary surplus that the group of 10 advanced economies will have to achieve and maintain over a decade to reduce their debt ratios to a more reasonable level, say 60% of GDP. Belgium and France's efforts will have to be fairly close to the historical median in this scenario. All others need to maintain higher primary surpluses close to the right end of the historical distribution, or even more than what was achieved in the past. This latter point particularly applies to Greece and Japan.
In light of these large long-term requirements, our report, the Fiscal Monitor, also looks at historical evidence on how to get there. That means what were the best historical efforts in the improvement of primary balances, and how does this compare with the consolidation efforts that are needed today. And we find that for the group of 10 advanced economies that I mentioned, the additional adjustment needs are not unique, but they have already been matched in the past.
The chart again displays a distribution for advanced economies. The number of countries is on the vertical axis. This time, the corresponding value on the horizontal axis shows the best improvement, that means the change in a country's primary fiscal position. The time frame that is displayed here now corresponds to the last 7 years of that best 10-year window. Why do we focus on this time period? The scenario calculations in our report, which show what level of primary surpluses countries have to maintain during 1 decade to reduce debt to more prudent levels, assumes that this 10-year window starts in 2020. So, from 2013, they have 7 more years to achieve the target primary balance. This comes on top of 3 years of fiscal adjustment from 2010 to 2013 that has already happened in most advanced economies. Thus, to make a meaningful comparison with historical episodes, we identify their 7 last years of 10-year large adjustment episodes. The chart shows that the best improvement among advanced economies in the past was sizable. Over a 7-year period, the median was 5.25% of GDP. In quite a number of cases, it was much larger. Let's compare this again with the remaining adjustment needs for the group of 10 advanced economies. Many of the countries lie below the median or are close to it, with the exception of Japan. This is because many have already undertaken considerable adjustments in the last 3 years.
The historical evidence shows how challenging the outlook is. Now, the evidence also indicates that improving fiscal balances is relatively easy, and it has been done before. The most difficult part will be to sustain large fiscal surpluses for a prolonged period of time. What is required for the 10 advanced economies with large fiscal imbalances is in some cases unprecedented. But there is a difference between saying that something has not been done before and saying that it cannot be done. In some cases, it hasn't been done because there was no need for long episodes of primary surpluses, so that's why we have not observed them in the past. The recommendations in our report focus on the elements for a good plan to achieve and sustain large primary surpluses over time. And this implies, first, the country should have a medium-term fiscal adjustment plan, and in some cases this does not exist yet in Japan and the United States, where they should be rapidly introduced. And second, fiscal adjustment should continue at a gradual pace where conditions, financial conditions in particular, allow it. And third, support needs to come from structural reforms that raise long-term growth and strong, credible fiscal institutions that help sustain the fiscal effort over time. Now, I've focused so far mostly on advanced economies, since in most emerging economies, debt dynamics continue to be relatively positive. This is because their growth continues to be strong and interest rates remain low. However, many emerging economies still need to restore their public buffers, public finance buffers over the medium term.
As the chart shows, in 2013, the average overall balance in emerging economies will still be 2 percentage points of GDP below what it was before the crisis.
Most emerging economies have the space to restore these buffers gradually, but a few, some of them, with very high debt ratios or other risk factors, particularly in the Middle East, this country will need to make more rapid progress in adjusting their fiscal accounts. I'm talking about countries like Egypt or Jordan, for example. Their large fiscal vulnerabilities call for more immediate fiscal actions, such as reforming subsidies, raising more revenues from consumption taxes, and broadening in general tax bases. Among the G20 emerging economies, or the largest emerging economies, India is a country with sizable fiscal challenges, even if not as acute as in the countries that I already mentioned. India's public debt remains, the dynamics of public debt remains favorable because of a combination of low interest rates and high growth. But lower growth prospects have indeed raised risks that these good favorable dynamics may not last over the medium term. Well, I hope this has raised your appetite for our report. In the Fiscal Monitor you will find more detailed analysis as well as more information on individual countries.